Okay, so on Thursday, Starbreeze went live with a pretty interesting update stream that I think marks a good turning point for the longevity of Payday 3. Before we talk about all the exciting news this stream brings, I want to acknowledge that Liz opens the stream by mentioning that this was a reactionary stream to the amount of questions that Almir was asked on Tuesday's stream. I absolutely love how engaged Starbreeze have been with the community recently, and so Liz decided to bring Mio to the stream to talk about the game. Mio having appeared before on streams as a senior game designer, but now, after what I assumed was a promotion, he's here as the games director. Now, they clarify that this is more of a formality rather than an actual shift in what Mio's responsibilities towards the game are, and so I wanted to mention that first, just in case you were as confused as I was with this change in terminology in regard to his position at Starbreeze. Long story short, to my understanding at the very least, Mio is still in the same position he always was, just now in a more permanent way. But with that out of the way, let's dive into the rest of the stream. The information we were given throughout this stream is almost entirely gameplay related and broken down into 3 sections: what's coming, what's in progress, and what's being explored. I really appreciate it being delivered in this way, as I think it sets the right level of expectation rather than everything being spoken about with the same level of certainty. So, what's coming? These are the changes we can expect to see in the next update, whenever that may be. Obviously, if there are any catastrophic errors or bugs discovered, that may change. These aren't set in stone yet, but are currently what's planned. Starting off with the Techie that thankfully isn't making its way to other heists just yet, Starbreeze are committing to make sure that the enemy feels good to play against, so I'm imagining they're keeping her exclusive to the Syntax Era heist to use that as somewhat of a testing ground until they're ready to add her to the other heists. For now, the drone's health and damage output is being lowered. We'll have to wait for patch notes to see exactly by how much, and on top of that, their respawn rate is being increased by 20 seconds, going from 60 to 80 seconds. We'll have to wait until we get our hands on the patch to see how meaningful of a change that is, but I think it's a good place to start. There's also a couple of weapon buffs for the Mosconi 12 shotgun, reducing its hip fire and pellet spread, as well as the R900 sniper, increasing its damage penetration and allowing the weapon to synergize better with skills. Speaking of skills, there are a lot of changes coming, so let's get through these as quickly as possible. Triage will no longer consume any edge, grit, and rush you have, but will now instead run a check for them, so you'll still get the 45% extra health if you've got all 3 buffs active, except now you don't lose them. Threat assessment now provides 20% damage reduction for marked enemies instead of the previous 10%. Negotiator now provides 2 additional resources from trading hostages, meaning you'll get 3 medkits or armor repair kits, and I'm assuming this will also stack with Silver Tongue, making employees, guards, or law enforcement drop 6, which is a very big change to the economy of those resources. Shell Shock now affects all enemies, not just non-special enemies, and applies a 20% accuracy reduction to them all. Quite a big buff if you ask me. High Grain and Steady Hands now work crew-wide, so if you have one of these skills equipped and another heist interacts with a medic or ammo bag, they will get the 20% bonus associated with the skill too, and if multiple heisters have the skill equipped, then the bonus is increased by 5% per person, so a maximum of 35%. Disengage now lets you sprint through Nadergas, something I'm very much looking forward to having the ability to do. And lastly, let's talk about the CQC Specialist line. This whole line, more or less, is receiving changes. Starting with the titular skill itself, CQC Specialist and its ace variation have now been flipped, meaning that the base skill gains or refreshes rush for grabbing a human shield, whereas that was previously its ace trigger, and now when ace, performing takedowns gains or refreshes grit, whereas that was previously its basic trigger. I want to make clear that the buffs have stayed the same. CQC Specialist Ace currently gives you grit for taking a human shield, a great way to keep your grit active throughout heists, but now you'll need to perform a takedown to maintain grit. Obviously, something that you can't do with hostages, so the ability to just grab a hostage and quickly refresh your grit has been removed from this skill, which I see as quite a big nerf. But if you are planning on performing those takedowns, the Groundskeeper skill now allows you to do so 60% faster compared to its previous 20%. Alternatively, if you plan on letting your SWAT human shields live, provided you still have Rush, the soft asset skill will now consume that Rush and repair your current armor chunk. It's worth noting that if your armor isn't damaged, your Rush won't be consumed by throwing away a SWAT human shield. And last but not least, the Savage takedown skill will now intimidate civilians just by grabbing a human shield, not just performing a takedown. Those are all the skill changes we can expect in the next update, and for the most part, I think they're all great changes, and I know they'll definitely impact the way in which I create my builds. To close off the section talking about skills, Mio mentions later into the stream that we'll be able to hack drones faster and from further away. He says he forgot to add it to the list, leading me to believe this is an update to a skill of some kind, but unfortunately he doesn't actually confirm that at all, only that it is coming within the next update. As for health and armor, we can expect the following changes there. Medic bags healing 50% of your maximum health, an increase from their current 35%, as well as restoring one of your downs, a much needed change if you ask me. This obviously stacks with the field surgery skill, allowing you to get 2 downs back from 1 medic bag interaction. First aid kits now also heal 25% of your health instead of 20, a small but positive change. In regard to armor repair kits now take 0.5 seconds to interact with. Honestly, I'd like to see them be instant, but I'll take what I can get there. And the standard armor lining itself now takes 3 seconds to heal instead of 4, a very small change that I can't imagine impacting much, but I'm sure Starbreeze have their reasons for implementing it, and so I'm glad it's coming. And to wrap up the what's coming section, we'll be seeing a slight change to the overkill difficulty, being that the assault difficulty can now increase mid-wave. What that means is, as you progress through a heist, the assault waves get harder. It's not like you see cloakers and dozers at the start of a heist, but currently, once you pass the threshold where these harder assaults would begin, the current assault wave would need to end, and then the next assault wave that began would be on the harder difficulty. With this change, that is no longer the case. Once the harder enemies can spawn, they will, regardless of how far into an assault wave you are. And that's just some of the stuff we can expect in the next update, but before we jump into the second and third section of the video, I'd like to take a moment to do something that I rarely do here on the channel, and ask that if you are enjoying this video or like the way I break down and present the information we've been given, that you consider subscribing. But without delaying any longer, let's move on to section 2. What's in progress? These are all changes that Starbreeze are looking to make. There's no certainty as to how much they'll change between now and them being added to the game, and even less certainty about when they'll be added to the game. But firstly, I'm pleased that the Techie is being addressed further. Their drones are now being made easier to notice. We know that they're testing making the drones easier to see and hear, on top of other things, but as of yet there's no concrete detail on how they plan to do this, only that it's something they're aiming to achieve. Before the Techies were introduced, it was mentioned that in the future their drones would not be targeted by sentries. Now Starbreeze are entertaining the idea that these drones can hack our sentries. If a sentry is hacked, it just overheats. It doesn't turn against you or get destroyed or anything. It just overheats the same as it would as if it was destroyed by regular law enforcement. We were also told around the time of the Techie's release that they were going to be getting another drone in the future, and we now know that that'll be the tactical drone. The tactical drone will try to blind the player, and if it does, you'll lose all your active buffs and be unable to regain them for 20 seconds. And hacking these drones will likely cause a flashbang effect to nearby enemies. While on paper, I'm not a fan of this idea at all, there are a number of questions that I'd want answered before writing it off entirely. How often can these drones blind you? How difficult is it to avoid being blinded by them? How long does the actual blindness last? Is it the same blindness as a flashbang or something new? And do they have the same spawn rate as other drones? But I know we'll be getting more information when this new drone actually comes to the game, and I really hope that that 20-second buff in accessibility is reduced to something like 5 to 10 seconds at the very most. I know 20 seconds doesn't sound like a lot of time, but I can imagine once you're actually in heist, it'll feel like an eternity. I'm still not exactly sold on the idea of the Techie as an enemy type, and so I guess we'll just have to see how these changes affect the way in which they influence a heist and go from there. However, the overhealing system is one that I'm very excited for, an effect applied by medic bags that heals you past your maximum health up to double your health, which by default is 100 but can be increased through skill lines that we'll get to shortly. This overheal health is only temporary health and depletes at a rate of 1 health every 2 seconds, however taking damage stops the decay of health for 4 seconds. Again, these numbers aren't set in stone, but can be influenced by the new skill line coming to the game. Which brings us nicely onto the Fortitude skill line. Its base skill grants you an additional 50 health, as well as grit every time you heal 2 or above max health. For the 50 health alone, I can imagine this becoming an easy 1-point investment for almost any build. But for a second skill point, its aced version provides you with another down and 50% increase to your bleed out time. And its mastery skill provides 2 charges to your deployables, allowing you to reach the full 8 slots that you can see on the models in-game. It's worth noting that despite this skill line being geared towards the overheal mechanic and the medic bag, this effect applies to any deployable. There are also 5 upgrades coming to this skill line. The first being that when another player uses your medic bag, you will heal for 40% of what they healed for, and that can take you into overheal. The second being that your maximum health is increased by 15 for each down you have. The third being that whenever you overheal, you gain an additional 10% of overheal for each down you have. The fourth being that your overheal decays 10% slower for each down you have, and interacting with a first aid kit pauses the decay for 10 seconds. And the final upgrade being that having any active buffs reduces the damage you'll take to your overheal health by 50%. This has the framework of an exceptional skill line. I for one can't wait to see how this overheal system affects the game. I do think that some of the wording for these skills and upgrades needs clarifying, such as the first upgrade. It says whenever a crewmate heals using a medic bag, but Mio clarified that it needs to be a medic bag placed by you specifically. While this may seem obvious, it it should be reflected in the description of the skill. And again, I should clarify that all of these numbers that I've just mentioned in regard to that skill line are subject to change. And speaking of change to skills, we're getting an update to some of the pre-existing skill lines with the addition of a new skill. Clean Slate is a skill that allows you to retrieve your first armor chunk by interacting with an armor repair kit, and will be the new mastery skill for the tank skill line. Disengage, the previous tank mastery skill, will replace Swift as the mastery skill of the Escaper skill line, and Swift will become one of the upgrades for that very line. While I'm not huge on the idea of rearranging pre-existing skill lines, I think these changes work well. It's also been mentioned that the Ziv Commando SMG and Northwest Assault Rifle are going to be getting some love. This is much needed for the Ziv Commando if you ask me, but I was surprised to see the Northwest Assault Rifle here too. I thought that as a weapon it was quite well balanced, so I'm interested to see what changes are made there. And last but certainly not least for this section, Starbreeze are looking at allowing players to purchase favours from the lobby screen and heist specific favours with C-stacks, as well as still earning them from drops. I can't even begin to explain how happy this change makes me. I've found myself avoiding certain heists until I have some of their heist specific favours, and so to have the ability to purchase them is such a good change. I'm hoping that the utility of the favours are taken into account and priced accordingly. If you ask me, they should cost between 5 to 20 C-stacks depending on the favour. And now let's move on to the last section, what's being explored. These are more or less ideas that either haven't begun development or are in the very early stages of it, and they are a new 2-play armor type that doesn't take permanent damage unless an entire armor chunk breaks, and can therefore always be healed back to full durability. Currently, this armor tier gives you 3 downs, the speed of the lightest armor, and a regen speed between the light and medium armors. Personally, I love the idea of chunks that always regenerate to full, but I think it may be a perk more suited to a skill line than a whole new armor type, though the likelihood is that there would be an accompanying skill line to this armor type anyway. Starbreeze are also entertaining the idea of an additional skill point being granted to the player at level 1, a new consumable slot so that we can hold on to medkits and armor repair kits that we find on each heist. I could see this being really useful on heists like Road Rage and No West for the Wicked, that usually end up with you leaving a bunch of these kind of consumables behind as you progress to the next section of the map. A skill that allows you to have multiple hostages following you at once. This could also be an effect added to an existing skill. It was something that existed in the game for a little while, but kind of as a glitch or a bug really, and so this needs a bit more testing and development before implemented as a feature. They're also looking into favours that change the amount of money or infamy points you earn from a heist, so instead of taking a favour with you into a heist, you can choose to have a payout modifier. I absolutely love this idea as well, but it depends on how the payout modifiers are obtained. Are they bought just like standard favours, or are they random drops like heist specific favours? So we're going to have to wait for some more information on that. Additional base functionality for ammo bags, just so they remain as useful as the medic and armor bags. The example given on stream was for increased armor penetration, but could also be something like damage multipliers. This one seems very open. A new skill line titled the Assassin skill line that focuses on rush and suppressed weapons, and later into the stream Mio also mentions that this skill line will likely involve marking too. And that's it, everything we learned in the most recent live stream. I really hope that this level of communication sets a new precedent for Payday 3 and marks a turning point for the game. I believe it's a really strong step in the right direction to not only tell us what's coming soon, but also the things that are in the early stages of development. And so with that all said, thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, drop a like on the video. If you disliked the video, drop a dislike on the video. Thank you very much for watching once again, and I will see you in the next video.